Saudi Arabia will be joining the Iran war after all, as open source intelligence accounts are reporting that Chinese satellites have revealed the location of 13 U.S. Air Force tanker aircrafts that are stationed in Saudi Arabia. And on top of that, Yemeni sources are reporting that Chinese satellites have also detected the construction of secret bunkers by the United States deep within Saudi territory. And military analysts are interpreting this as a tactical escape plan by the United States from Iranian and also Yemeni missiles that will be thrown their way once the war starts. And remember that the Iranians have already said that if the United States uses Saudi Arabia to launch attacks against Iran, then Iran will strike Saudi Arabia. And this is great news for Benjamin Netanyahu, who wants a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, his two enemies. Benjamin Netanyahu has been angry against MBS ever since MBS refused to normalize relationship with Israel. And although the US doesn't want a war-torn Saudi Arabia, Israel does, as a war-torn Saudi Arabia.
Chún trên to và sầm đạp crom na gà với tọt mà chưa pi trong ngay
就剩你了。喂喂哦，怎么复活那个后面？哦，我的fuck！我不怕你，我不怕啊！哦哦哦！ เห็นอีกทีเนี่ยบอลเข้าประตูไปแล้วครับไม่มีธงไม่มีสัญญาณจากผู้ตัดสินด้วยนะครับ 3-1 ครับเดี๋ยวดูครับมายังไงครับโอ้โห
มันทานเนี่ยนโยบายเนี่ยមានលុយសិទ្ធិតារាចម្រៀងភាពយន្តទេចុងក្រោយនេះសូម្បីតែអ្នកប្រាជ្ញបណ្ឌិតអ្នកចេះដឹងហើយនឹងព្រះអង្គម្ចាស់បាទពូជស្ដេចប្រជាប់ដែរអញ្ចឹងសរុបមក
The scale of what they just announced is actually terrifyingly huge. They aren't just making a few of these to help out. Hyundai and Boston Dynamics are currently building a new factory.
Trong ngày thêm mình được chơi lôi kia cô ta do rằng mình được để cái áo chơi ok. Phối cái áo chơi kia mình cho mình rồi mình đi lôi cái máy tê. Chơi được.
សហព័ន្ធកីឡាបាល់ទាត់កម្ពុជាបានដាក់គោល
ហើយអ្នក trading មួយថ្ងៃហ្នឹងអត់ដឹងថា trading ហ្នឹងវារៀបរៀងពាក់ព័ន្ធជាមួយនឹង website ចាក់បាល់ចាក់អីទៅមួយទៀតអត់ដឹងទេ
What actually causes the tides on planet Earth? According to the mainstream
Visual Basic គឺជាម៉ាប់ផលិតផលមិនចូលឬចូលមករងចាំមើលទាំងអស់គ្នាជំនាញជើងឆ្វេងច័ន្ទសនិតជំនាញជើងស្ដាំមេជូបាប៊ូសាក្របបាល់កាត់ឡើងឬយ៉ាងណាឱកាសទៅកន្លែងនេះច័ន្ទសនិតសានិតឬក៏មេទូបាប៊ូសា
Real reason I keep telling people that Iran is not bluffing is because they're not considering this. Iran claims its hypersonic missiles can reach speeds above Mach 11. At that speed, defense becomes a guess. An aircraft carrier cost over $10 billion. There's thousands of Americans on board, and it was built to withstand everything except time. Hypersonic missiles don't follow predictable paths. They can maneuver mid-air. If a target moves, the missile can follow. Detection windows shrink to minutes and sometimes even seconds. Iran has been claiming it has thousands of missiles. Whether that number is accurate or not, the message is deterrence. In modern warfare, you don't need to fire the weapon. You just need your appointment to believe that you can. For more information on geopolitics and how to best position yourself for the future, follow me on IG. Real reason I keep telling people that Iran is not bluffing is because they're not considering this. Iran claims its hypersonic missiles can reach speeds above Mach 11. At that speed, defense becomes a guess. An aircraft carrier cost over $10 billion. There's thousands of Americans on board, and it was built to withstand everything except time. Hypersonic missiles don't follow predictable paths. They can maneuver mid-air. If a target moves, the missile can follow. Detection windows shrink to minutes and sometimes even seconds. Iran has been claiming it has thousands of missiles. Whether that number is accurate or not, the message is deterrence. In modern warfare, you don't need to fire the weapon. You just need your appointment to believe that you can. For more information on geopolitics and how to best position yourself for the future, follow me on IG. Real reason I keep telling people that Iran is not bluffing is because they're not considering this. Iran claims its hypersonic missiles can reach speeds above Mach 11. At that speed, defense becomes a guess. An aircraft carrier costs over $10 billion. There's thousands of Americans on board, and it was built to withstand everything except time. Hypersonic missiles don't follow predictable paths. They can maneuver mid-air. If a target moves, the missile can follow. Detection windows shrink to minutes and sometimes even seconds. Iran has been claiming it has thousands of missiles. Whether that number is accurate or not, the message is deterrence. In modern warfare, you don't need to fire the weapon. You just need your appointment to believe that you can. For more information on geopolitics and how to best position yourself for the future, follow me on IG. Real reason I keep telling people that Iran is not bluffing is because they're not considering this. Iran claims its hypersonic missiles can reach speeds above Mach 11. At that speed, defense becomes a guess. An aircraft carrier costs over...
បាទស្រឡាញ់គ្នាដល់មិនគិតពីរូបសម្រស់បាទខាង
ជាការបង្ហាញចំហដ៏ម៉ឺងម៉ាត់របស់ទីក្រុងតេហេរ៉ង់រដ្ឋមន្ត្រីការបរទេសអ៊ីរ៉ង់ Abbas Araghchi បានបញ្ជាក់ច្បាស់ៗសារជាថ្មីថាការវាយប្រហារយោធាមិនអាចកំទេចកម្មវិធីនុយក្លេអ៊ែររបស់ខ្លួនបានឡើយសារព័ត៌មានអ៊ីស្រាអែល Jerusalem Post បានដកស្រង់សម្ដីរក Araghchi ដែលអះអាងកាលពីថ្ងៃសុក្រទី 20 ខែកុម្ភៈថាមិនអាចយក
Once you build up this sort of force, and it's a very big build-up of force now, it wasn't a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about it, and Donald Trump was talking about this great armada assembling. And as I said on Sky then, well, it's not much of an armada, really. It's just a carrier strike group, the Lincoln carrier strike group, which it was then. But now it's the Lincoln carrier strike group, along with the Ford carrier strike group. There's more than 120 aircraft this week have come in from the continental United States into various bases around the region. And then there's all the aircraft on these two carrier strike groups. So each of the two carriers has about 4 squadrons of F-18s. That's about 48 aircraft, 4 squadrons of 12. So that's another 96 aircraft.
Okay, guys, ship between the US and Iran is kicking off yet again, and I'm about to get on a long-ass flight. So let's run through this before we don't get any more time. So the US, fun little fact for you to sleep with at night, has now gathered the most amount of air power in the Middle East since all the way back in 2003, the Iraq invasion. And Trump is saying that the world now has 10 days for Iran to either make a deal or else, quote, bad things will happen. And here's the thing, it seems that both countries are preparing for that possibility. The US has sent not 1 but 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East, one of which is the largest warship in the world. They've also sent a huge fleet of 50 plus fighter jets, including F-22s, F-35s, F-16s. And Iran in response has begun repairing and
32,000 people apparently, 32,000 have lost their lives in Iran's January protests.
Okay, let's talk about Iran because things got very real very fast and you need about 30 seconds of backstory first. In 2015, under President Obama, the U.S. struck a nuclear deal with Iran. Uranium comes out of the ground weak. Enrichment is the process of making it stronger. At low levels, it powers electricity. At 90%, it powers a nuclear bomb. Under the deal, Iran stayed at 3.67%, basically power plant level, and let international inspectors in. In exchange, the U.S. lifted sanctions, which means we stopped blocking Iran from selling oil to the world. That's their entire economy. Inspectors confirmed Iran was complying. Then Trump comes in 2000 now. Okay, let's talk about Iran because things got very real very fast and you need about 30 seconds of backstory first. In 2015, under President Obama, the U.S. struck a nuclear deal with Iran. Uranium comes out of the ground weak. Enrichment is the process of making it stronger. At low levels, it powers electricity. At 90%, it powers a nuclear bomb. Under the deal, Iran stayed at 3.67%, basically power plant level, and let international inspectors in. In exchange, the U.S. lifted sanctions, which means we stopped blocking Iran from selling oil to the world. That's their entire economy. Inspectors confirmed Iran was complying. Then Trump comes in 2018 and kills the deal. No replacement plan, just gone. Then Iran goes from 3.67% all the way to 60% enrichment. There is zero civilian reason to 60%. That's like a pistol pointed at a nuclear weapon. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The very first week of Trump's second term, Netanyahu walks into the Oval Office and lays out 4 military attack options on Trump's coffee table, literally on the table. Everything from Israel attacking alone to a full joint U.S.-Israel operation. Trump chose diplomacy first, but attack preparations continued the entire time. Then in June 20, bombed Iran's nuclear sites. Remember that? Now Iran is rebuilding. Netanyahu keeps rushing back to the White House 6 visits, more than any other world leader, each time pushing conditions that he knows Iran will never accept. Analysts say it plainly. War has become the goal itself. And if Israel strikes Iran alone, Iran retaliates and the U.S. gets dragged in anyways. So here's where we are right now. Iran had massive protests in January as inflation heads towards 60%. The government shot protesters. A senior official admitted they gave wounded protesters a final fatal shot. They said the quiet part out loud. Trump responds with the largest U.S. military buildup in the Middle East since the Iraq War in 2003. 2 aircraft carriers, basically floating military bases, plus 50 additional fighter jets, all without approval from Congress. Iran responds with live fire drills in the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow bottleneck where 31% of the world's oil passes through. They temporarily closed it while talking peace, and oil prices jumped 4% in one day. Trump delivered his latest war ultimatum to Iran on Thursday at his own peace summit. And remember, this was the same guy who last year said his strikes obliterated Iran's nuclear program. So if that's true, why do we need to strike again? He hasn't explained it, no stated targets, no plan for what happens after. And the Epstein files with Trump's name in them, and now we're close to potentially bombing Iran without a vote from Congress, without a clear reason, and without a plan. I'm not connecting those dots, I'm just showing you where the dots are. You decide. We killed a deal that was working. Netanyahu laid war plans on the coffee table, and now we're on the brink of war over the exact thing we already solved once. Receipts, not speculation.
Now is the time for Iran to join us on a path that will complete what we're doing. And if they join us, that'll be great. If they don't join us, that'll be great too. But it'll be a very different path. They cannot continue to threaten the stability of the entire region, and they must make a deal. Or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But bad things will happen if it does.
It looks like the U.S. is about to bomb Iran again, but let's talk about some history between these two countries that you may not have known. Something worth noting.
Trey, what's the latest?
All this, I think, is really
the U.S.
ពេលខ្លះខ្ញុំមិនដឹងថាខ្ញុំត្រូវរៀបរាប់អារម្មណ៍បែបណាអ្នកគ្នាប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំស្គាល់តែពាក្យថាដេកលុយចូលមកហ្នឹងគឺខ្ញុំស្គាល់ហ្មងពេលខ្លះខ្ញុំមិនដឹងថាខ្ញុំត្រូវរៀបរាប់អារម្មណ៍បែបណាអ្នកគ្នាប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំស្គាល់តែពាក្យថាដេកលុយចូលមកហ្នឹងគឺខ្ញុំស្គាល់ហ្មងកាលពីមុនណាអ្នកគ្នាខ្ញុំជាមនុស្សម្នាក់ដែរខំប្រឹងធ្វើការខ្លាំងប៉ុណ្ណាតម្រាំតែឲ្យមេលើកឡើងប្រាក់ខែឲ្យបានបន្តិចហ្នឹងគឺខ្ញុំខំខ្លាំងហ្នឹងហើយអ្នកឯងកាលឆ្នាំមែនខ្ញុំ2003
This morning, President Trump with an ultimatum to Iran, warning, quote, really bad things will happen if they don't agree to a nuclear deal, giving them this deadline.
I'm 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
A source familiar with the planning tells ABC News the president is considering a range of options, from an initial assault designed to enhance the U.S. negotiating position to larger-scale strikes on government, military, and nuclear targets. That source saying the U.S. would hit targets that would imperil Iran's ability to retaliate.
How would the military strike? Is it to wipe out their nuclear program?
I'm not going to talk to you about that, but we're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them.
The president campaigned on keeping America out of foreign conflicts, and a source familiar tells us the president still feels he can force the Iranians to the negotiating table, even if he strikes the country. Trump has already ordered a massive buildup of U.S. forces in the region. The USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, along with 4 destroyers armed with Tomahawk missiles, now on the way. More than 100 additional fighter aircraft surging to the Middle East in recent weeks. Iran overnight with its own warning, telling the United Nations that Tehran will respond decisively to any U.S. military action, threatening retaliation on all U.S. bases, facilities, and assets in the region.
Now, the president still has not made clear his overall objective here. Is it to halt Iran's nuclear program, or is he also seeking regime change? And all of this coming after the president insisted that U.S. strikes on Iran last spring had, quote, obliterated its nuclear program, begging the question of why so many additional strikes would be needed now.
Podcast ABS
តម្រូវការគ្រូ
វិសាខាអាចនឹងធ្លាក់ចេញពីតំណែង Top 6 នៅចុងសប្តាហ៍នេះការប្រកួតលីកកម្ពុជារបស់កម្ពុជាគឺ Cambodian Premier League.
This is Charles Darwin.
ការចូលរួម
បងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាថ្ងៃស្អែកទៅណែអត់បើសិនជាទៅណែចៅកំ
សូមផ្ដាំផ្ញើទៅជីវិតនៅជនបទខុសពីនិត
Mr. President, are you considering a limited military strike to pressure Iran into it?
ការធ្វើទីផ្សាររបស់អ្នកគ្នាគឺពុំមានបញ្ហា
So there is a very good chance that everything Donald Trump has done regarding trade deals and tariffs, particularly with China, is about to disappear. Now, as you may have heard, we are asking China to help us in stopping Iran from closing the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, we're asking China to talk to Iran on our behalf. And that is because our incompetent administration believes that China is heavily reliant on that oil, and they're going to need it. Except they don't. Yeah. You see, China has been stockpiling oil for a very long time, and they now have over 1 billion barrels just sitting in stockpiles. They consume about 15 million barrels. They get about 5 million of those barrels from the Middle East. When you have over 1 billion barrels of oil that you can just tap into anytime you want, that 5 million barrels, you don't really need it. If they chose not to replace any of that oil from other sources like Russia, Malaysia, Canada, which they could easily do, the Strait of Hormuz could be closed for 100 days, and China would still have over 500 million extra barrels of oil just sitting. That means China is holding all the cards now. Similar to Canada. They can do that for 100 days easily and not blink an eye. But if the Strait of Hormuz is closed for 2 weeks, that's a disaster. That is something that would take many months, possibly years to recover from. And don't think for a second that China's not going to remember how Donald Trump has been barking at them and running his mouth at them ever since the moment he took office. What in the world does Donald Trump have to offer China that would get them to actually speak to Iran? When the United States has literally positioned themselves for China to do whatever they want to us. China can literally do whatever they want to us, and there's nothing Donald Trump can do about it. You want us to talk to Iran? Okay, get rid of the tariffs, get rid of the trade deals. Everything goes back to the way it was. Oh, and by the way, Congress is going to have to pass a repeal of the TikTok ban. Every ounce of leverage that Donald Trump had, or any ounce of leverage he thought he had over China, has completely disappeared with one decision. And don't think for a second that China won't take full and complete advantage of the enormous amount of leverage that Donald Trump has just handed them on a silver platter because he was listening to Bibi Netanyahu. Now, I don't know what China's going to do, but I know this. They certainly have not forgotten what Donald Trump has done. Thanks.
Iran is gangsta! Yo! Them Iranians gangsta, bitch! They gangsta as fuck! Why Iran said, breaking fucking news, why Iran said, if Trump attacked Iran, they got hackers that got videos of DTJ having sex with minors. Why the Iranians said, if you touch this country, we dropping them videos. Oh, gangster, gangster, bitch. And I'm like, what's going on with Iran? Trump was just all Iranians got Trump on a balls. The Iranians get down, they don't play.
ម្ចាស់សាច់ជើង4ដែលមានកូនដូចចំណៃទាំងអស់គ្នាមិនអាចឆ្ងល់ថាហេតុអីបានជាកូនយើងគូក៏អត់ព្រមញ៉ាំចំណីសត្វមកគាត់ដែលខានគាត់ញ៉ាំតែអាហាររបស់មនុស្សទេខ្លះទៀតញ៉ាំហាឡាសតែសេកូអង្គចកាថ្លាមន់អាំងពងទាកូនចាញ៉ាំសាហាវញ៉ាំឆ្ងាញ់ជាងយើងទៀតដោយសារតែអីចំណីសត្វមួយចំនួននៅលក់នៅលើទីផ្សារអត់សូវឈ្ងុយបងប្អូនដែលសារតែគេអត់បានចំអិននៅក្នុង slow bake បានថាគេចំអិននៅក្នុងសីតុណ្ហភាពមួយដែលទាបចំអិនសឹមយូរនៅក្នុងឡដើម្បីរក្សាក្លិនឈ្ងុយនឹងឲ្យនៅដដែលហើយសិនបានចេញជាប្រភេទចំណី kibble ដែលជា slow bake ហើយជា super food ដែលមាន protein រហូតដល់ 40% ច្រើនណាស់បងប្អូនសម្រាប់កូនឆ្កែ 40% ចាល្អបំផុតសម្រាប់កូនដែលត្រូវការឡើងគីឡូល្អបំផុតសម្រាប់កូនដែលកំពុងតែពោះធំបំបើកដោះឬមកគាត់ទៅតែងើបពីឈឺចា super good ដោយសារតែវាជា super food ប៉ុន្តែចំពោះការញ៉ាំត្រូវតែផ្ដល់ឲ្យនៅក្នុងកម្រិតមួយដែលត្រឹមត្រូវជាក់ស្ដែងក្រុមហ៊ុនគេបានចែងនៅខាងក្រោយកញ្ចប់តែបងប្អូនអរនេះអាចមើលទៅតាម guideline របស់គេនៅខាងក្រោយកញ្ចប់នឹងបានឧទាហរណ៍ឆ្កែមកខ្ញុំ20គីឡូជាងតម្រូវឲ្យញ៉ាំ580ក្រាមទៅក្នុងមួយថ្ងៃបើសិនជាខ្ញុំឲ្យកូនខ្ញុំញ៉ាំមួយថ្ងៃ2ដងព្រឹកល្ងាចជាងយើងចែកទៅព្រឹកកន្លះល្ងាចកន្លះនោះនឹងយើងឃើញចំនួនដែលយើងឲ្យកូនយើងញ៉ាំត្រឹមត្រូវហើយសិនជាកូនយើងគាត់តែ5គីឡូប៉ុន្តែពេលថាគាត់ស្គាល់មកត្រូវអំឡងទៅ10គីឡូជាងយើងអាចមើលតែកន្លង10គីឡូវិញបានហើយយើងនឹងឃើញថាចំនួនត្រឹមត្រូវដែលយើងត្រូវឲ្យកូនយើងញ៉ាំនៅក្នុងមួយថ្ងៃហ្នឹងប៉ុណ្ណាបើសិនជាកូនឆ្កែរបស់យើងគាត់កំពុងតែបើកូននៅទឹកដោះអត់ជាបញ្ហាបងប្អូនអាចគាត់ញ៉ាំតែសេរីបានដោយសារតែគាត់កំពុងតែចាំកូននៅទឹកដោះដោយសារតែវាជា super food ហើយមាន protein ខ្ពស់បើសិនជាយើងឲ្យកូនយើងញ៉ាំទៅតាមចិត្តអត់មាន guideline ត្រឹមត្រូវយើងអាចនឹងធ្វើគាត់លើសគីឡូបាន
Welcome to Wuthering Heights. For me, the first time you see Wuthering Heights should feel like this fever treatment. This is Emerald's Wuthering Heights. That's all I wanted. Twisted, provocative, romantic. What I wanted to make was something that distilled the feeling that I had when I was 14 when I read it. Every camera move, every single prop has an emotional reason for existing. Oh, what a wicked trick! It is undeniable.
Margot Robbie is strong, passionate, and mythical. I love working with her.
Jacob can do anything. He could just stand there with the rain machine over his head and he'd just be completely undone. That's what it is to be in love to a catastrophic degree.
I have not broken your heart. You have broken it. Never breaking it, you've broken mine. So kiss me. And let us both be damned.
set 1 set 2ហ្នឹងហើយគេថាស្នងការភ្នំពេញឈ្នះហើយហើយចាំ set 3 ទៀតមានថាឱកាសខ្ពស់ណាស់បាទសម្រាប់ 360 ព្រោះស្នងការភ្នំពេញល្អៗកីឡាករនេះល្អៗណាស់ក្នុងណាស់បាទយើងមើលឃើញថាពេញតែម្ដង
ដែលយើងធ្លាក់ចុះសូមចងចាំមនុស្សពីរនាក់ឲ្យច្បាស់ទី1គឺអ្នកជួយទី2គឺអ្នកជាប់ជីវិតយើងមិនឡើងរហូតទេនោះក៏មានន័យថាជីវិតយើងក៏មិនធ្លាក់រហូតដែរមេឃលៀងគង់តែរាំងវិញជារឿងធម្មតាសង្គមនេះគឺផ្ទុកតែមួយឆាវទេរៀនទុកខ្លួនឯនឹងងើបឡើងវិញជីវិតជាជំរឿរបស់យើងពេលខ្លះយើងធ្លាក់ចុះក៏ជាពេលវេលាល្អមួយដែលបង្រៀនយើងពីសង្គមរស់នៅពិតប្រាកដដែរកុំបាក់ទឹកចិត្តដួលកន្លែងណាត្រូវងើបកន្លែងហ្នឹងដើរបន្តទៅមុខទៀតជីវិតយើងជាម្ចាស់តែម្នាក់គត់បើសិនជាយើងដួលយើងមានជំរឿពីរជំរឿទី1គឺដួលបន្តជំរឿ
នេះជាបទសម្ភាសន៍រវាងលោកនាយករដ្ឋមន្ត្រីកម្ពុជាហ៊ុនម៉ាណែតជាមួយសារព័ត៌មាន Fox News របស់
Plaster ឬមួយក៏ម៉ាស៊ីនបាញ់សម្អាតថ្មីចាញ់បានស្អាតហ្នឹងខ្ញុំលក់ដល់ជាងគេគឺដែលខ្ញុំកំពុងតែបង្ហាញដល់អ្នកនរគ្នាហ្នឹងហើយទី1គឺតម្លៃសមរម្យមែនតើត្រឹមតែ$29ទេហើយមួយទៀតគឺមាន3ម៉ូដនៅក្នុងការសម្អាតផងដែរហើយទូចងាយស្រួលយកតាមខ្លួនហើយក៏ងាយស្រួលប្រើប្រាស់ដែរហើយសម្រាប់វិធីក្នុងការដាក់ទឹកវិញបងគ្រាន់ទាញកំប៉ុងហ្នឹងចេញពីម៉ាស៊ីនមកចាក់ទឹកចូលទៅខាងក្នុងនេះវិញទៅគឺរួចរាល់ហើយអាចធ្វើការចាប់ផ្ដើមសម្អាតបានហើយពេលដែលបងធ្វើការទិញម៉ាស៊ីននេះទៅទទួលបានជាមួយនឹងក្បាល flash ចំនួន2ផងដែរជាមួយនឹងខ្សែសាកមួយប្រភេទនេះគឺសាកដោយរុន2បែបនេះបងដូចខ្សែសាកដែលគេឲ្យមកក្នុងប្រអប់តែម្ដងហើយនៅលើដងនេះក៏ងាយស្រួលកាន់ដែរហើយគេមានជាមួយនឹងប៊ូតុងបិទបើកជាមួយនឹងប៊ូតុងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរម៉ូដផងដែរអញ្ចឹងបងបើចង់បានជាមួយប្រភេទ flasher ដែលមានគុណភាពតម្លៃសមរម្យណា brand Xiaomi មួយនេះដោយសារតែខ្ញុំលក់ដល់យ៉ាងច្រើនហើយ
ดูด่วนๆนี่ก็ถล่มแหลกยิงไม่พักนะครับบุรีรัมย์ถล่มสุโขทัย6-0ชนะอีกแล้วนะครับนำยาวๆครับตอนนี้นำ14แต้มแล้วนะครับคุณผู้ชมคลิปนี้มาคุยถึงเรื่องราวของบุรีรัมย์ยูไนเต็ดกันหน่อยนะครับว่าที่แชมป์ไทยลีกล่าสุดลงเล่นฟุตบอลไทยลีกเจอกับสุโขทัยนั้นนี้บุรีรัมย์นะครับไม่มีคำว่าผ่อนถล่มอย่างหนักอย่างแรงออกนำไปก่อน1-0จากเอดัวโดมานชาจากนั้นนาที34ก็เป็นทางฝั่งของบุรีรัมย์นำ 2-0 จากพิโยงพรรษาเหมวิบูลย์จบครึ่งแรกนี่ 2-0 ครึ่งหลังยิงอีก4ลูกบุรีรัมย์นะครับได้จากกิอาเม่บิสโซลี่ยิงเกือบทุกนัดบิสโซลี่เท่านั้นไม่พอบิสโซลี่มาบวกอีก2ลูกนาที86 90กับ90บวก1เป็น 5-0 เท่านั้นไม่พออีกนาที90บวก3ปีเตอร์ซูจ่ายบอลให้โรเบิร์ตซูยิงเข้าไปจบเกมบุรีรัมย์ถล่ม 6-0 ครับคุณผู้ชมฟังไม่ผิดถล่มสุโขทัย6-0ตอนนี้นะครับเก็บเพิ่มได้อีก3คะแนนเป็น53คะแนนนำคู่ต่อสู้เนี่ยไปถึง14คะแนนและโอกาสเป็นแชมป์ไทยลีกคือสดใสแต่น่าเป็นห่วงคือสุพนัทเหมือนตาไม่รู้เจ็บหนักหรือเปล่านะครับเห็นกล้ามเนื้อตึงก็ต้องรอดูนะครับว่าสุพนัทจะเจ็บหรือเปล่านะแต่ที่แน่บุรีรัมย์น่าจะเป็นแชมป์ไทยลีกในเร็วๆนี้ครับยอมรับพวกเขาโหดจริงเพื่อนๆคิดยังไงกันบ้างคอมเมนต์เข้ามากันและกดติดตามให้ถึง 200,000 ผู้ติดตามด้วยครับ
This is Forest City, one of the weirdest cities I've ever been to. This city is located in Malaysia and it's completely abandoned. This city was built in 2016 and cost over $100 billion to build. So I went to go check it out, and when I was walking on the beaches, it just didn't make sense to me why no one would live here. I even tried to spend the night at their best hotel, but nobody was there to even check me in. So I did some more exploring around the city, and it just felt so eerie and weird to not see any cars on the street and these beautiful homes completely empty. It honestly felt like I was in the TV show The Walking Dead. Another thing that I noticed is that there's security guards everywhere here, and they don't like it when you film. And I got really weirded out because I asked the security guard why there's nobody here, and he told me that there was a lot of people here and he sees people all the time. I don't know, it almost felt like they were trying to hide something, and something just felt very odd here. Comment below what you think about this city, and if you know anything more about this place and why it's abandoned, please let me know because I'm really curious. And also, if you do happen to come here, don't jump in the water like I did because apparently there's huge sea crocodiles everywhere here.
在关心我的世界下了雨，像风吹过8千里，有人和月都曾爱过你，可是潮汐干涸在有情人的海底，那最潮湿的意，结果这最伤人语句。或许要客气才得人心。
Your position is
that the United States didn't ask for a permanent suspension of enrichment? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, what we are now talking about is how to make sure that Iran's nuclear program, including enrichment, is peaceful and would remain peaceful forever. And in return, Iran, does some confidence building.
This is actually happening, but the Supreme Court just agreed to hear President Trump's case on ending birthright citizenship. And this could read.
So the great leader of Iran.
The Trump administration strategy is to say, we're going to bomb you and wage war against you unless you capitulate, unless you surrender and sign this so-called agreement. And it's not an agreement, it's capitulation. I mean, it's the US wants everything and Iran has to give up everything. Iran gets nothing, the US gets everything. Trump has said in the past that he doesn't believe in, both sides benefiting in mutually beneficial agreements. It's one side takes all, winner takes all. So the US not only wants Iran to give up any ambitions for nuclear weapons, which honestly, at this point, if I were an Iranian official, the only conclusion I could possibly make from the last several years is we need a nuclear weapon as soon as possible. My view is that Iran should get one. I know that may sound a little controversial, but no one's going to mess with North Korea. I mean, that's the biggest lesson you can learn from the overthrow of the Syrian government, the overthrow of the Libyan government, the invasion of Venezuela, the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro, now the attempt to destroy Cuba. I mean, you need a nuclear weapon. Iran should get one. The U.S. understands that. The U.S. understands that if Iran actually had nuclear capacity, the U.S. could not threaten it in this way. But it's not just that. I mean, that's, of course, ostensibly one of the main goals of the U.S., but the other demands being made by the U.S. are completely outrageous. One, Iran has to end all support for Palestinian groups. So that is to say, Iran has to surrender the Palestinian struggle at a time when all of the other, Arab regimes surrounding Palestine have done nothing whatsoever to support the Palestinians. Iran is the only major state power. There are non-state groups, of course, in Lebanon and Iraq and not really Syria anymore. Yemen, of course. I guess you could say Ansar Allah does have state power. They're the exception, in Yemen. But otherwise, Iran is the only state with significant resources that has continued to support the Palestinians. The U.S. is telling Iran, you have to give that up. You have to end support for resistance groups in other countries, including Lebanon, including Iraq, including Yemen. So Iran would have to surrender its entire foreign policy, abandon all of its partners and allies, abandon the Palestinians, the nuclear deterrent, which is the only way to ensure that it actually is safe from a U.S. war, and then Trump from you again. I mean, this is not a negotiation. It is a capitulation, which is why we've seen report after report saying that they have talks and they don't go anywhere. And then Trump says, yeah, we had a talk with Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu doesn't want, I still think that it's unfortunately likely. I don't want there to be a war, of course, but you cannot negotiate with the US. It's a crazy rogue regime. And even if it says it wants an agreement, let's not forget what happened last year. This is an ancient history. Last year, Iran was negotiating with the US. There were several rounds of talks. I know you've interviewed Mohammed Marandi, who is involved in some of these so-called talks. And then when Iran thought it was negotiating with the Trump administration, Trump gave Israel the green light to bomb Iran, and then the US bombed Iran. So that was during the last round of so-called talks that were obviously a farce. It was in order to distract Iran to prepare for this secret or surprise war on Iran. I would not be surprised if this is what the US is planning to do once again. And just look at a map of all of the U.S. troops in the region, not just the more than 40,000 U.S. troops that are stationed in the dozens of U.S. military bases in this region, but the additional troops and warships and aircraft carrier that Trump has deployed, he referred to it proudly as the massive armada that he has sent to surround Iran. Iranian officials are not stupid. I think they can clearly see what the U.S. is planning here. The U.S. is accustomed to bombing small little countries that can't defend themselves, that don't have significant militaries. In the case of the Palestinians, they don't have a formal military. Or, you know, the U.S. attacked Venezuela, which does have a military, but it's a very small country. It's about 1/12, 1/13 the population of the U.S. It's much poorer. The U.S. is used to invading Panama, this tiny country, like it did in 1989, invading Grenada in 1983. Yeah, the U.S. did invade Iraq in 2003, and Iraq was relatively much bigger, but still, compared to the U.S., it's tiny. And also, that was a complete disaster for the U.S. The U.S. thought it could completely control Iraq, and it failed. There was a massive insurgency, and the U.S. was eventually forced to retreat in failure. Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan did not really have a formal military either. They had, you know, advanced guerrilla fighters who had almost no resources. It's one of the poorest countries on earth. And the U.S., again, occupied Afghanistan for 20 years and was eventually forced out. They came in, they overthrew the Taliban, and they left, and the Taliban's back in power. So the U.S. doesn't have a good track record at actually, you know, controlling these foreign countries. It is very good at bombing the hell out of countries and destroying them, destroying all of their infrastructure and sending them back to the Stone Age, as Dick Cheney famously said. But, you know, looking at a country like Iran, I have no doubt that the U.S. has the capacity to do a lot of damage, to bomb Tehran and Isfahan and other cities, to make, you know, major parts of the cities into rubble, to kill lots of civilians, to sabotage the economy. But control Iran, no way. Kill Iranian officials, yeah, okay, fine. But at the end of the day, I mean, like, what is the goal here? Is the goal simply to destroy Iran's nuclear program? Well, that's not going to happen. And I mean, because again, every time the U.S. attacks Iran, it's only further confirmation that Iran needs to actually pursue nuclear weapons. Ironically, in the past, Iran was not really that interested in nuclear weapons. I actually think now it is much more interested because it recognizes that the North Korea option is the only real option if you want sovereignty under this imperialist system, where the U.S. is a global dictator that thinks it can overthrow any country. Iran and Venezuela are close partners.
Thế Papa.
ថ្ងៃនេះនាំបងប្អូនមកស្គាល់ផ្លែរាំងសាបនេះបាទផ្លែរាំងសាបនេះប្រសាទជាតិស្វឹងជាតិជូរទៅជាផ្អែមនេះអានេះទុំមើលណាគេទុំខ្លាំងនេះផ្លែវាខំខំតែមុនបានបេះឲ្យច្រឡងដែរបានបេះញ៉ាយទៅណាទុំច្រើនណាហ្នឹងហើយឥឡូវខ្ញុំមកសាកមកផ្លែមើលសិនមើលរសជាតិវាក៏ឆ្ងាញ់ដែរដូចផ្លែឈើរីយ៉ាងជូរអែមនេះជូរអែមឆ្ងាញ់អាហ្នឹងញ៉ាំហើយយើងមកញ៉ាំនេះផ្លែត្រឡឹងតឹងបាទមកសាកត្រឡឹងតឹងនេះជូរបើឥឡូវអានេះទុំពេកនេះអានេះអត់សូវទុំណាបែរអានេះមួយសាកឆ្លាតបែរអត់ជូរអត់ទេអានេះជូរខ្លាំងទៅមើលខ្ញុំសាកឲ្យមើលអានេះឲ្យញ៉ាំហើយយើងលេបវាបន្តិចទៅយើងដកដង្ហើមបន្តិចដើម្បីទទួលយករសជាតិថ្មីបាទឥឡូវខ្ញុំសាកជូរទៅជាផ្អែមវិញបងប្អូនណាជូរទៅជាផ្អែមខ្ញុំហូបអស់មួយហ្នឹងអត់ជូរទេជូរទៅជាផ្អែមឥឡូវកុំឲ្យយូរពេកឥឡូវយើងមកសាកស្វាយនេះកំពូលជូរហើយនេះណាស្វាយខ្ចីនេះកំពូលជូរឥឡូវខ្ញុំចិត្ត ចិត្តសាកមើលនេះ
លេងចិត្តវាដើមយើងហ្មង
ចិត្តជើងមកឥឡូវនេះវិញយើងដាក់ផ្លែរាងសាបមួយហើយឥឡូវយើងចិត្តសបកចេញបន្តិចឲ្យវាស្អាតបន្តិចឥឡូវយើងដាក់មើលហើយចិត្តហើយអានេះស្វាយនេះជូរណាស់កំពូលជូរហើយជូរ
សម្រាប់បងៗដែលកំពុងតែមានបញ្ហា
តើគិតថា AI ជំនួសតំណែងអ្នកសរសេរកូដបានខ្ញុំពីអ្នក
តែតែមានបញ្ហាដូចខ្ញុំមុខមុនផងជាប់ផងអាច
They're about to send a ship to the deepest part of the ocean where nobody has ever been before to look for undiscovered species, and we're all about to be able to